In this video, we want to talk about what happens when we place a civil cell for an intersection, for example, but we cannot make the edge of pavement go away that comes from our template geometry. If we take a look at the template that we're using here, two-lane urban in the examples workspace, we have this point here that you see called match line seek left, and so if I test this horizontally, you'll see that it makes everything beyond the edge of pavement turn off, and we put a display rule on the curb and gutter, and then the rest of the components and end conditions are a child of that curb and gutter. And then this point is seeking a feature definition called match line within a range of 100 feet. So we can take care of removing our curb and gutter, our end conditions, etc. by putting in basically that feature definition called match line, which I've done here is a completed model for you to see the problem. The problem is this blue edge of pavement. And the reason that blue edge of pavement's coming in, we go back and take a look at that template. This particular point, this left edge of pavement, is utilizing a feature definition called road _ edge of pavement. Well, we need that edge of pavement to be drawn by the template because it designs a profile for us that takes into account super elevation transitions, etc. off of the main baseline. And that's handled through the properties of a feature definition. And so if we go over here to Project Explorer and we look at our standards for that particular feature definition called road edge of pavement, which is here, we take a look at those properties. There's a toggle in the linear default settings called create template geometry, and you'll see that I've set it to true for the edge of pavement, and it's also set to true for your back of curb, your sidewalks, etc. in the examples workspace, and you'll see all of these are being drawn by the template in the civil cell. But I can't make this line partially delete, so if I sent this to the plotter, I'm going to see that line physically show up. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a technique that will essentially hide that line from the end of the fillet to the end of the fillet. So the first thing I want to do is I've deleted the civil cell, and I want to show you how we make our main line not draw the sidewalk and the end conditions and the curb. And I showed in the template how we have a line seeking a feature definition. And so what I've done is I've set that feature definition active here. You see match line, and I made it active, and I can literally go draw a line, a horizontal line, and I'm just going to approximate it for now. We'll move it later, but I'm just going to drag a line through here, place it, and then what I have to do is I have to select the main corridor, and then we want to add that line as a corridor reference. And so we select the line, we do a right click to complete, and it'll reprocess the corridor, and now we have essentially shut everything off except the pavement itself on that left side. When I turn off my construction class, you're going to see that I have this blue line, and it is profiled from the template, which we need the profile, but yet I'm not going to be able to partially delete it. So I'm going to show you something that we came up with that I think that's going to solve this issue. To do that, we're going to go in and actually make a modification to the civil cell to make it to where we can hide that portion of the pavement so that it won't be seen when we go to plot it. So what I've done is I've opened up our feature definitions imperial.dgn lib because we want to make some changes to the levels. We want to add a level, we want to add an element template, and we also want to create a feature definition that we're going to be replacing the seam line in that civil cell. And so the first thing I want to do is in the levels, I've come down to the geom centerline level. I'm going to right click up here and turn on the column for priority. Go ahead and change the geom centerline. Make sure that it's set to a priority of 500, and also in examples workspace you would need to set, I believe, road centerline to a priority of 500. The next thing is you want to create a new level, and I called it road seam line, and make sure that on road seam line that you have the weight heavier than the road edge of pavement, and the road edge of pavement is going to be a weight of 2, so I've set it to a weight of 3. Also, I have the priority at 400. You want it to be less than the priority of geom centerline, but greater than the priority of the road edge of pavement. And so just to show you the color, I'm picking this bottom right one here that's going to enforce the use of background color. And so we have road seam line created. And then the last thing is just check your road edge of pavement level. And so you can see I've changed that to a priority of 300. It already was a color blue and weight of 2. I left that alone to make sure that it was a lesser priority than the road seam line. Then we're going to go to our element templates, and we're going to basically repeat the process for those in terms of the priorities. And so if I go down here to linear, and then I go down to geom centerline, I did a right click in here. I went to add general settings, and I added the priority, and I set the geom centerline to 500, and I also went down and did the same thing for road centerline. So you'll see road centerline is set to 500, and then I went to road edge of pavement, which is here. I changed or added a priority, made it consistent with the level, set it to 300, and then I made a new element template called road seam line, which is here, and I changed that to a priority of 400. And so I pointed to the level, and then added in the priority. And so those are what I did with the element templates. And then on the feature definitions, the only thing I changed on the feature definition really was I just created one. I didn't change anything, but I went down to linear, and I went to roadway, and I went down then to, basically I copied road hinge and made it a new name called road seam line. I changed the prefix, and then on the plan and the profile, and on the projected profile, and on the 3D, I pointed to the new element template called road_seam line. And so those were the changes that I made to the DGN library to have our new level and our level priority changes and new element template, and then priority changes on the element templates and the new feature. So now we want to jump over to our civil cell library that we're going to work on. And what I did was I made a copy of T-intersections, and just copy of basically, and I'm going to work on that one. And in this particular file, what I did was, it's pretty simple. I just went to this basic modified, or the basic T one, and I selected this seam line, and then I changed the feature definition. It was set to road hinge. Now I'll set it back for just a minute. So this is what you would see when you first come into it. I simply select that line, go to the quick properties, and now put my new linear feature definition here called road seam line, and that's pretty much it. And you'll see that immediately you're getting that to be masked out. And then lastly, we come back over to our design project that we're doing our testing on. And with that open, we proceed then to place civil cell. And I'm going to go to my copied library here, to my basic T, and say OK, and just follow the prompt. So our secondary road center line, our main line edge of pavement, and then we'll reverse our placement references. So we'll reset then because we're done with that. I do not want to clip the corridor, and we're going to accept that placement. And immediately you're going to begin to see the benefits. And so if I turn off my construction class, you can see that that line is essentially invisible, and you can play around with colors and weights and that type of thing. But what I've noticed is when I plot this out to like a PDF, that line, you cannot see it. And so it seems to be working quite well. But just to clean this up, just for general information here, we want to add a key station. We want to go ahead and move this basically what I call a seam line. And so I'm going to go over here and snap it to the end of the fillet. and then that'll bring that in. You'll see that fill up that void. And then we'll do the same thing on the other end. Let that snap. And of course that line that I'm placing right there, that what we call, I call it essentially a match line, or something that we're searching for in the template. That is a construction class, and so when I turn off my construction class, that line will go away. So the line is here essentially, but you have to understand it's essentially masking, and so you do have a little bit of a bleed area here, but it's going to be barely noticeable when you plot. And you can change that line weight, you know, to a little bit less if you want to. And that's why I suggested making sure that you're just one above whatever the edge of pavement is. And so the edge of pavement is a weight of 2, then make that one, you know, for example, a weight of 3. You could try making it the same weight. I'm not really for sure the impacts on that, but when I did a test plot, it seemed to work out pretty well. And this is proof. This is where I sent it to an Adobe PDF plot, and so you'll see that same intersection, and I didn't turn off that particular line that's killing my mainline template, but you'll see that edge of pavement does not show up in there, and it actually looks really good. So I think that's a pretty good way to do things, and what it's going to do is allow you to then place the civil cell where you're not going to have that line then coming through the intersection. Just a couple of additional tips. One thing that you might want to consider, I know earlier in the video when I set the weight on the seam line in the civil cell, I set it to a weight of 3. I've actually found that does allow for a little bit of bleed through when you plot. So I found that weight of 5 works very well. If your edge of pavement is a weight of 2, set your seam line to a weight of 5. The other tip is to avoid getting any masking on your fillet. One thing that you can do is basically follow the same process as earlier. You can put it on a different level if you want to, or you can basically put a new feature, new element template, new level for the fillet, where the level priority is going to be higher than the seam line. And so we set our seam line to 400. You'd want to put your fillet level priority at a 500, and then that will then be on top of your mask line, and so that when you go to plot at that point, you will not have any masking of your fillet line, and your plotting will actually look perfect. And so those are just a couple of final tips to add to the end of this video.